Hello, and welcome to a chat with Tim Beaudet. Today, mostly focusing on the Eggcelerate franchise, which he is the main guy behind, but Tim also has a much longer history than that in game dev, going back way farther than mine, probably. So we'll chat on some of that as well. But if you want to start off, if you just want to give us a quick intro about, I guess, who you are as a developer and content creator, Tim.
So I'm an indie developer streaming on Twitch live every day, basically for the last 6+ years. Focus on racing games and trying to find a way to make some money at it so I can keep doing this for the rest of my life rather than go get another job. But that's definitely tricky. Prior to doing that, I had worked a job in software just kind of for financial stability and to build up the runway that I'm now using to do my little startup. And before that, I had even worked in the game industry for like 5 years on like Rock Band 3 and Darkest of Days and a couple other games on the Wii and mobile, etc. So it's been a good adventure.
Yeah, yeah. So how about we can go chronologically a bit, I guess, going back to when you first got into game dev, and then once we catch up, we can mostly focus on the three Accelerate titles. I mean, really primarily the Accelerate to the Tropics that you released just a few weeks ago. I actually played that one the other day on stream, so it's fresh on my mind.
Nice. Nice. Hope you enjoyed it.
I thought it was really fun actually. I thought the level design was maybe more unforgiving than the last couple ones, but I had fun. I didn't beat the game. I rage quit, but maybe I'll get
Oh,
back
I,
to it.
I am I am actually used to that. I do think you're correct in the level design was a little more unforgiving, but we'll probably
Yeah,
get there soon.
yeah, yeah. So what first got you in the game dev?
Um, in middle school, one of my friends basically came over to my house and booted up QBasic one day and showed me how to write guess a number. I mean, that's not exactly a thrilling game as you would go with it, but just that interaction of writing guess a number, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to make games. Prior to that, I wouldn't even have told you anything about how a video game would be made or that I even had any interest in it. But that's definitely what sparked it, and it was something that I instantly knew. Like that day,
Yeah.
I just knew, and I didn't know how to code. He had showed me like 5 commands, if that, and the variable that he had chosen a name of, I thought that was a very specific word that I couldn't create another one. And so I was basically reusing that same variable for like the first couple weeks of my coding
Oh
adventures
wow.
until I finally figured out that you could make more of them. That was a game changer. You can make more variables. Uh, and yeah, I just basically taught myself QBasic from there. I also dove into C++ a few times throughout high school. Um, Eventually went to college and started making games professionally.
Some people would say that you should never reassign the value of a variable, Tim. Um, okay, so did you do like a game dev degree or a computer science or something similar?
Yeah, I did game design and development at Full Sail University.
Oh, cool. Was that a fun experience?
It was for the most part. It was also quite shocking to watch my starting class go from like 120 people to 60 in just a couple months. So that was kind of like eye opening of do I actually have what it takes? Since there's just so many people that this school kind of there's a lot of people that don't know what goes into making a game and they just think it's a fun idea. So they get to the school and then they realize that, oh, this isn't actually for them because games aren't always fun to make. Like there is
Yeah.
definitely a lot of fun in making them, but there's a lot of stuff that you have to do to that's not fun too.
Yeah, it's not as fun as it may appear on the surface to someone that knows
Yeah,
nothing about
exactly.
programming. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me too much. I mean, there's a similar sort of phenomenon with like computer science students where they just think, oh, it's a generally in demand thing that pays well, and they don't realize, like, man, you were getting into the wrong profession to just only be doing it for those reasons, because it takes a lot of practice. A
Yeah,
lot
the
of
logic thinking is not for everybody. It absolutely clicked for me and is something I've always enjoyed, but it's certainly not something that works for every brain.
Yeah, I feel like software dev is one of those things that you just really need to genuinely be. I mean, maybe there's exceptions, but I feel like really 99% of the time you need to genuinely be interested to be able to keep up with it.
I think that's where it shows pretty clearly in people's work ethics with it. Like, if you're not caring for the craft, it's just kind of like the code, yeah, technically does a job, but shows, like
Yeah.
there's probably better ways to have solved that problem, but you didn't really care to put the thought in.
Yeah, and those people probably won't move up too much in terms of
Yeah.
the level of work they're doing. So, what did it look like when you got out of college? Did you have internships, or did you have in a decent time just landing a job right out of college? How did that go?
Oh yeah, just out of college. No, that was a nightmare. That was an absolute nightmare. So now I have student loans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are fun, and I have no way to make money, and nobody was hiring me. Like, sure, I have this fancy degree, giant student loans, and I couldn't even get a job at Walmart or McDonald's or anything. Like, I just could not get any job at all, whether it was in the industry, not in the industry. It didn't matter what. Until finally I did get in contact with one of the friends I had at school, had got their foot into a company and basically got me a very small weekend gig. It wasn't much, but it was just enough to be like, at least I'm getting paid to make games, so let's take this. And so I made a little prototype for them, just something that they wanted to test an idea, see if it was a valuable idea, and it was just a quick, basically game jam thing that I threw together for them, and they were pretty happy with that. And a few months later, I was actually bringing a friend down to Full Sail because I knew the area and they wanted me to just show them around a bit. And they were looking and thinking about going to Full Sail, so it's like, sure, I'll take a road trip with you. No worries. That's kind of chill. And as I was going down there, the company that I had did that prototype for was also nearby, so I wanted to go just, shake hands and meet them in person since I didn't actually do that job in person, right? Um, and in the process of shaking their hand, they're like, "How about you just stay with us for about a month or two, and we can whip out this prototype a little bit further and start working on it." It was an Xbox Live Arcade game at the time, and I was like, "Sure, sounds great, money, a job." So I stayed there for, I think it was like 2 months, basically living in the office. Absolutely not the way you want to work, but it was a pretty good first job, and that actually got my foot into the industry enough to find a longer term job, and from there it was a little easier.
Yeah, I think that's got to be typically the toughest part, right? Is just getting your foot in the door, getting the
Yeah,
first
that
gig.
that that first job was so hard.
What kind of so what did you start out with tech wise? Like what engines were you working with, or like what did you learn in school and start using out the gates?
In school, I mostly built my own engines. I built two of them during my time at Full Sail. We also touched, and I mean very briefly touched, Unreal Engine. I'm I don't know why, but I didn't actually understand what Unreal Engine was doing at that point in time. I don't even know what era of Unreal Engine it was, but it
Mm.
felt basically like it was just a level editor. And I thought we were making levels for Unreal Tournament is really what it felt like to me. and I think maybe I just went in with the wrong idea, or just had something just very confused in that whole class as to what we were supposed to do. But so they did teach us a little bit of the Unreal Engine as whatever state it was in at that time. And when I got into the industry, when I was so that prototype that I did, I actually did in my own engine. I whipped that up in my own DirectX engine for the guy and was like, here you go. Here's just a quick prototype. It wasn't meant to be anything specific. It was just testing an idea. And I told them specifically, don't use that code in a game because it's not production ready. They later went on to do that, but that wasn't my problem. And then when we were doing the XBLA game, that was C# and XNA. So I don't know if that was actually an engine or just a framework, but it wasn't that hard to use and pretty quick to get into. Throughout the career, it was mostly custom engines for each studio had their own thing going, and eventually, kind of as I'm doing my own thing, I'm still working on my own engine as well as playing in Unity every now and then, or just exploring other engines for some fun.
So you have, do you know, like, estimate, like, I guess how many years you spent doing full-time salary game dev stuff before you went full-time indie a couple years ago?
So I did full-time game dev for 5 or 6 years, and then I jumped into software for stability because every 9 to 18 months I was swapping jobs. That's just how my career trajectory went in the industry. Was the project's over, you move on to the next company. Really kind of sucked, but I do know some people had different trajectories where the project was over and they get to stay with the company, but that didn't seem to be my trajectory. I think it's because I stuck with smaller companies. I always enjoyed the being able to have my hand in more parts of the game than just one really small piece. And I think that lends itself to our project's over, we don't have the budget to continue. So we're going to go down to like the smallest team we can and find the next thing. And then so after the 5 years in game industry, I did software for like 9 or 10 years before, like many of that was on alongside building my own indie adventure before I did jump full time.
Are there any, as far as the game dev jobs you had, are there any really standout moments that you feel like you learned a lot or did something really cool or just had some sort of effect on you?
I think one of the biggest effects was between 2 jobs, and I don't really want to mention company names for many reasons, but 2 particular jobs had a huge impact on where I've taken my career as I've moved forward. Part of the reason why I went to software, actually, because I felt like I learned enough. And effectively, what happened is in job A, which I'm at first, I was being crunched nonstop. Like, I'm talking 12, 14-hour days pretty much regularly. They're buying you pizza in the evening or something as your overtime salary or such. Like, it was, I've never cared about how much money I'm making in the game industry. I know a lot of people like to say how little the game industry makes, but to me that's always paid well enough. Even with crunch time, I've never had too much of a problem. But what did give me a problem was after working my butt off on this particular project, and like every milestone was weeks of crunch to get that milestone. It was never relaxed. When that project actually shipped and I got to go home at 6 o'clock in the evening, I got home and I was like, what do I do now? And like, it was just a huge wake up call of like, that's not a feeling anyone should ever have. They should never get home and be like, what do I do? because I was literally only going home, going to sleep, and going to work. Like that had been my life for months up until that point. Shortly after that, I swapped to a different job, and this particular place had a no crunch policy, and they were actually really good at sticking to it, even when me and another programmer really wanted to keep putting a little bit more effort in. They're like, "No, you should go home anyway." Um, so that alone wouldn't have done anything. Like just going from crunch to no crunch wasn't actually enough to change my mind on anything. But after being at that company for like 6 or 7 months, we had to change the engine of the project. And that is a huge undertaking that can usually kill a game, just entirely destroy whatever game you were building. But we did this process in 2 weeks, me and another programmer. In 2 weeks, we took out the entire framework, the back end of this project, and switched it over to another back end. And it was like 95% where we were 2 weeks prior. And I'd never seen that sort of magic happen. I think it all happened because we were not crunched. The company really put emphasis on quality code and taking the time to refactor things when it made sense. And the relationship I had with the other programmer was sort of magical in the sense that we could both go back and forth on what we thought was the right approach for some problem, and he'd respect my opinions as well as I'd respect his. Like we weren't out there fighting our egos as far as my idea's right and it has to be what we do. It was more of a what's right for the project, and it was just a magical situation that showed me not crunching can get so much more done even in less time than what you can if you just put in all the hours.
Okay, I would agree with that, but I feel like I also have to press you a little bit because you're pretty guilty of putting heavy crunch on yourself for your indie dev work, right?
I am very guilty of putting heavy hours in, but I don't necessarily think it's the hours that like that is definitely something that you can reach for in the theory of that story, but it wasn't necessarily hours. It was more of when I was being pushed in the Crunch Fest project. If I ever went to a producer and said, "Hey, if I took 4 hours now and changed how this works, we could save 10 hours in the future." If I ever tried to do something like that, they would be like, "No, that's 4 hours right now that we don't have time for. You just keep moving forward." Like it wouldn't even been a question. There's no way it would ever have happened. Um, so it was really like seeing the how quality matters more than the quantity. Just adding on to
Yeah,
crap, it's still crap. Whereas if you take
yeah,
the time to shovel the crap out, you've cleaned it up.
that makes sense. Yeah, and you do exemplify that in your indie dev work because you track your time and you track what you're spending your time on very closely to make sure that you're putting all your time in the most valuable spots. Is that
Try to.
something that how long have you been how long have you been doing the time tracking stuff as in depth as you do now?
Almost as soon as I started taking my indie adventure as a real, like, this is a business that I'm going to start trying to build for myself, which was in 2018.
Yeah,
So I Archer was my very first project, and that's when I really started saying I'm going to take my business seriously and start approaching it that way. And then in June of 2018 is when I started tracking my time and doing my monthly reviews.
gotcha. Well, I guess let's yeah, tell me about so when you first in 2018 when you first transitioned into like really taking your indie dev seriously, what led to that, and then what led to you 2 or 3 years later deciding to take it full time?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I'm not entirely sure what actually got me to be like, no, we need to take this seriously. I think a little bit of it is just I've always wanted to make a living from my own games. one of my big dreams. And up until 2018, it's always been like, I'll make some games, I'll do some work on my stuff, and it'll be fun. And yeah, it's kind of I do it when I want to, right? Like I just kind of take it when I want. And for some reason, in late 2017, I started like I had done several things in the past, like an hour a day is one of the projects I tried doing, where I'd put just an hour of my day into my indie adventure. Whatever I did, it didn't matter. Um, and that worked for a while, but then I faded out. And eventually, I started streaming in the mornings of late 2017. And when that was feeling fairly consistent, I'm like, why don't I actually take my dream seriously and make this happen? So basically, every morning, 3 hours before work, I'd work on my indie adventure. Um, and I don't really know what made that switch flip, but when I did, it gave me the power to dedicate that time to my business, even if I didn't want to. I'm not a morning person. Despite me waking up at 6 in the morning for the last 6 or 7 years, I am not a morning person. It was one of the biggest challenges to actually figure out how to deal with that. But it's like if I can't work on my games in the morning while I hold a full-time job, how will I ever be able to make games on my own? As my life and my money will depend on it, right? Like if I can't do it now under the safe security of a job, there's no way I can do it under the stressful conditions of not having money. That's the way I had looked at it while I had the job. Um, but it is hard. It is absolutely, it's hard, and I lost a lot from things that led up to the decision to go full time. Like there's definitely sacrifices I put into the indie adventure that I wouldn't have done if I knew that was happening. But um, it's having a full time job and then putting hours in on the side of it takes a lot of your time, and a lot of your focus goes into that. That sometimes gets taken away from other areas of life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
I've
when I
experienced
started
that.
realizing, when I started realizing that, I basically I looked at my runway, and um, it was just kind of time. It it was one of those things of I have a 4 or 5 year runway. I'm making a little bit from Twitch that at least slows the drain of that, and I know I can put the time I need to into my games. So if I can't do it with this, then will I ever be able to? Like, when you're never going to be comfortable with that decision. It's an uncomfortable decision to make.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny you mentioned the 1 hour a day thing. I kind of had a similar thing before I was taking my stuff really seriously. Where I was like, well, if I just work on RetroMMO 1 hour a day, and I've got people in Discord and they know I'm doing that, I'll make steady progress. And then I just sort of trailed off, and I stopped putting in an hour a day because I couldn't get the motivation. But then once I started streaming, that was kind of a turning point for me as well, where it's like the stream kept me really motivated because it was like a higher degree of like being held accountable. Do you feel like your stream actually played a big role in you making this transition, or just coincidence?
I think it played a huge role. Like you said, the accountability, but I wouldn't even go with only accountability. What I found when I was doing the 1 hour a day is um, there would be days where that hour was actually successfully moving forward on a target. And then there would be a day where I would open up my IDE and start to make progress, but not actually get anywhere because either I opened up Twitter or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it might have been, and just got distracted. And or just opened up my IDE and just sat there, not really moving forward because you don't always know what to work on, or you don't making those first moves is so hard. It's so much effort to, even if you're just going to change a color, and I tried that type of trick so many times. Like, okay, I'm just going to go change the color of something even if I don't want that color changed. Just change it and change it back, and that can sometimes trick you into getting other work done. But it's also just distracting, and once I started streaming, it's like I can't be distracted because even when I had no viewers, if somebody popped in, they would not be expecting me to be doing nothing. They would be expecting me to be talking about what I'm doing, and that pressure alone, even with no viewers, was enough to really get me moving.
Yeah, I know very well what it feels like to go live and then just stare at your IDE for 3 hours and then go offline. Um, yeah, for me that's been sort of a weird development though, where I've sort of reached up. I remember when I first started the game dev streaming thing that I would feel like very pressured, like I need to be. I'd feel bad if I was just staring at my IDE. I'd feel like, man, I would need to be making consistent progress to be working towards my goal of building my business. And over time, I've slowly just stopped caring because I'm like, well, I'm streaming. If the stream is entertaining, that's all that really matters. I guess where do you, like, on that spectrum of thoughts? Where do you lie? Like, how do you really value the work that you're getting done more so than the content that you're giving, or yeah, where do you lie on that?
Generally speaking, I still believe that the work I'm getting done is the important part of my stream. I see that basically in what my viewers respond to me as what they enjoy about my stream. They enjoy my consistency and that I'm always getting stuff done, and that motivates them to get stuff done on their own projects. Um, they're I do see what you mean where you could easily fall into the I'm streaming, so we're just gonna have some fun. I have had days where that happens. And it's also kind of like, I guess more where I relate to that is when I'm trying something or when I'm actually in a more exploratory or a different mood. I don't know exactly how to describe this mood or whatever it is, but if somebody in chat suggests something, very often I'll kind of shoot it down unless I'm in this specific mood where I'm like, yeah, let's just explore. And so I'll go down the rabbit hole of wherever chat wants to go. And that kind of, to me, leads to what you're saying is just creating the content, and that is the fun of the stream. And sometimes that can still move you forward, like when I'm in that exploring mode and it actually either teaches me something that does or does not work. Even learning something does not work is still learning something, because maybe you learned it could be applied if you did something different. Maybe it just doesn't apply to your situation right now or something. Um, but yeah, it's for me. It's always been about that focus to get stuff done on my own games. I am having some troubles lately though, which is really weird. It's more of a mental game in my head. I can like the stream is playing tricks on my mind. And I know absolutely everyone that leaves a comment in my chat is doing so with the best intention. I know that everyone there is wanting to see me succeed. But having done this for like 6 or 7 years and hearing X, Y, or Z could be better, or X, Y, or Z could be improved in this way, or you should add X, Y, or Z, like it doesn't matter what the topics is. It's just it has built up this issue in my head where I am currently reading every something could be better remark as a what I have is not good enough. And I know that that's not what it means, but that is mentally what's happening at this point in my streaming career, I guess. Like, it's hard to explain because for years it didn't happen. For years, I could just shrug it off. Did not matter. but as of lately, it's kind of there, like just chipping away at me.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's. I mean, I know you mentioned earlier that you're feeling a little bit not so confident in regards to how Accelerate's been performing. Is you think that's part of the? It's just hitting you more because you're down more right now, maybe.
That is definitely part of it. Yeah, the Accelerate's not hitting where I wanted it to, and I also think another part of it, and I'm looking to change this in the next couple weeks. It's not something that I can change in a day, and I've come to terms with that. Like, I wish I could, but one of the things I think it is also I'm not focused on anything like a project right now. I don't have a
Mm,
project to work on tomorrow, right? Like, I'm still exploring what project I'm going to be working on, and that unknown, at least for me, is disruptive to my mental state because I like to know where I'm going to be. Like, I like looking 3 months down the road and being like, that's what I'm aiming for. Let's go.
yeah, I've felt similar stuff. Yeah, I don't know if this would be common with a lot of game devs or not. I think both of us are kind of workaholics a little bit though. But I feel like at my very best, like my overall like mental health and like day-to-day enjoyment is so directly correlated with like how invested I am in a project. Like if I'm working towards something for my MMO where it's like a very exciting release and I'm very directly working towards that and we know it's going to be out in a couple of months and I'm just building features that are like I know people want this and it's going to make a lot of people happy. I feel so motivated. Or like when I'm doing a game jam especially, that might be me at my best. It's like I'm on drugs when I'm doing a game jam. I'm so excited that I'm just like have so much direction in what I'm doing. But when I'm just working on like a side game that I enjoy but isn't anything crazy, it's just just a cool thing to do on the side, I'm just feeling like meh overall in a yeah.
Yeah, I definitely have that workaholic tendency. And when I have definitely noticed when I'm getting chunks of stuff done, my enjoyment definitely is higher. Um, I have absolutely experienced game jams as a drug, like you're saying. Like you're just riding the high. In fact, Accelerate started in Ludum Dare 46,
Right.
and that was one of those jams that was a drug ride. Like we just went all out, and it was a great experience. Um, but I've also experienced game jams, and actually the last two Ludum Dares, I've really been struggling to even get through using the 3 week extra time they allow.
Mm.
And I want to do it just because I have a streak of like 22 Ludum Dares in a row that I've done. And I want to maintain that. But is it really maintaining it if I'm not enjoying it? You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like I'm doing this just for that
Yeah,
streak
it's
and
the
not because I want to make the game.
yeah, I would argue that's probably not a very good reason to do it. But if I were in your shoes, I'd be like, damn, I really don't want to miss that streak, right? So
Yeah, that is
that's
that is the real thing.
well, so I remember very clearly when you first went full time indie. We actually we had a private call. I remember you were talking with a lot of different people, getting their opinions about you going full time indie. And I remember your plan at the time was you were working on a very long term project that was related to like a custom engine or some custom software for like real time racing physics, and you were pretty much you were making your whole decision about whether you're going to go full time indie based off of could you reasonably build that business before you run out of money, and I think what I said was, oh yeah, I think yeah, like 4 or 5 years, and this is a very niche thing that nobody's done. Yeah, I'd feel pretty confident about that. And since then, you've switched your focus to, I guess, focusing on uh, like more smaller games or like things like Accelerate. So
Hmm.
yeah, I'd like to hear a bit about that. I mean, yeah, if you maybe give a quick summary of that project and what sort of led to you moving away from that, putting that on the back burner.
So my dream project for a very, very long time, possibly even when I was in high school is when it started, has always been a very realistic, physically accurate racing simulator. And I don't mean like a haha funny simulator here. I mean like an actual, you can't really distinguish, at least this is the idea, you can't distinguish between racing in your little setup at home versus on the track. Like that's like hyper realistic is where I'm aiming that project at. Um, and for me to do that, I feel the best choices is for me to do my own custom engine, in like physics especially, but possibly even rendering and everything else. At least that's what I've always aimed for, is to build up my own entire engine. First, I came from a time in games when that's what every company was doing. But second, I see it as if I am using one particular engine and I'm tied that strongly on this particular project, if they change their direction or don't support a feature that I need, I'm then out of luck, and I could be years into this and be out of luck. I'd rather have control and ownership of the core technology. So that's why I've always made my own engine for that one. Is it's important for that longevity. Like that particular project in my eyes, once it is public, I can continue working on it for like 20, 25, 30 years if I wanted, right? Like it is a non-ending project, just keeps getting deeper and deeper. But so when I first went indie, that was actually my goal, was to start working on that project right away. Start putting together some of these little projects that I've made and bringing them together to make the racing simulator, because that's actually what all the little projects have been for, is little stepping stones that kind of make pieces that will be used on it, or at least gain experience that will be useful for it. But I then got kind of a little publishing deal of sorts to make a game for a different platform that was new and upcoming. They had since pivoted, which kind of canceled my project, but it was a good way to kind of make a little bit of money as I started going indie. And then when they pivoted, I went back to my racing sim. And as I started working on it, which I did from July until like September, I think that was last year, I kind of got a little timid on whether I would be able to market the game to enough people 4 years in the future when I'm ready to get people playing it, that I'll have enough money to keep working on it for the 20, 25 years, right? Like, it was basically that gamble. In 4 years, will I have at least 1,000 people giving me $50 a month to keep going, or $50 a year? That's what it was. Yeah, 1,000 people, $50 a year is what I would need as a barest minimum to keep things going. And I kind of felt like I wasn't confident in that choice. Like I wasn't confident I'd be able to build up that audience, and so I felt that going with smaller projects that still build things towards that goal, like I can still learn experiences that will help me with my simulator, and I can build technology that will help me with that simulator. But there are smaller projects that I can sell along the way. I get to go through the entire release cycle. And by going through the release cycle, that includes the marketing phase that I'm not amazing at. It also includes going through trying to come up with ideas that people will find valuable, and build out a product, sell it. And yeah, there's going to be some along the way that are not going to work. And hopefully there'll be some along the way that do work.
Yeah. So I didn't even realize, I guess, how much you viewed the smaller projects you're working on as actually being, contributing to the larger goal of the physics simulator. So that's nice. I thought that it was more along the lines of, like, you saw how successful the first Eggcelerate was, and you were like, wow, I should just be focusing on this since this is what people are interested in. I mean, to some degree, I guess it was probably that, right? That game influenced you to sort of
to a
look at
very
it.
large degree. So the original Accelerate happened. The original Accelerate happened because of Ludum Dare.
Right.
Like, yeah, I started in Ludum Dare, but I wound up being 12th in fun, right? Like, that's 12th in fun is a huge, like, that's the only game I've ever had that's done that. That's not that means something, right? Like that's giving you a hey, this is a fun game. And so I kind of knew I was onto something with that, and I pivoted to say, hey, let's make this and release it for Easter. And I was expecting 200 or 300 sales. Like, yeah, we'll make the $100 back from the Steam fee, but it's not like we're gonna make money. And I didn't make money. I don't want anyone to read into that comment saying, hey, we made some money there. But it sold 1,000 copies, and I did significantly better than I was expecting it to, right? Like, it had some traction outside of my community. Not significant traction. It didn't go very, very far, but it was definitely more than what just my internal community was able to support me with. So I was kind of like, hey, there's an idea there, and it's actually a good idea. And so I figured, well, next Easter we'll release an update and we'll do something else. It was actually meant to be a smaller, just a few levels, and do a little addition to it. And somebody on stream said, why don't you do a DLC? Which at that point I was like, okay, then I want more levels than just a couple, because it wouldn't be right to make you pay for something and just have like 2 levels in it. And it wound up being basically a game bigger than the original, because I added the winter physics and I added collectible snowmen. It was literally bigger than the original with more features and the same number of levels and everything. But I was forced into a DLC based on the decisions I had made up to that point. Like, I could not put it on Steam as a regular game because there wasn't enough time before Easter. Here's the thing about holiday games: the holiday doesn't move. Easter doesn't move. No one is going to move it for me. So I couldn't just say, yeah, let's push this back a little bit. And to me, the game with Easter eggs was a perfect timing to release it. So I just kind of sucked it up and was like, DLC shouldn't be too bad. And it might even get people to buy the original, and I'll give them a bundle, and we'll see what happens. Well, it didn't do so well. And I put that mostly because of that DLC issue. It confused a lot of streamers. I didn't get much for influencer marketing at all in that particular round. Nothing compared to the first time. And it completely flopped. But at least to my knowledge, it flopped because of the DLC and the confusion of it. Everyone else was still telling me it was a fun game. They all liked that it grew from the original with the collectibles.
Well, what was the confusion at this point, right? Because it's just DLC. Like, why were people confused?
The confusion was, at least for the streamers, in trying to get them to I don't know if I used Keymailer and other services wrong when I was doing it. It is how they had suggested that I should try using it, was to send both the base key and the DLC key, which is just kind of how I did it when I sent out those keys. And I think maybe the messaging that I had in that also wasn't as enticing, or as I don't know. It's a little weird because I was releasing a DLC, and I think the streamers that are getting that messaging are kind of like, yeah, I don't want to play a DLC for a game I haven't heard of. I think that's kind of where it went.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so the marketing basically flopped. It also flopped because I went way out of my time budget and basically had to use the marketing to finish the game. You can't sell a game that's not finished. Like, it was kind of in a really hard place for me. I just had to eat time I was planning to spend for marketing and keep developing it, which meant my press release suffered and a bunch of other things suffered. And I looked at it as a big failure on marketing on my part. Like, okay, the game didn't do well, but I understand why. or at least I felt that I understood why.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured we'll try again next year. And next year we won't make the same mistake of this marketing issue, and we'll give it a little bit more time, because if I'm going to make a basically a sequel that's the same size as the original or bigger, I need a little bit more time than what I'm giving myself just that 1 month. So that brought us to the tropics.
Well, we maybe you touched on it. I think we skipped over though the fact that you. So I guess the timeline so far is you released the original game Easter 2021, and then you released that DLC 2022. But then this past December 2022, you re-released the DLC as a proper game.
Yes. Yeah, we did skip that piece. That one wasn't done so much to make money as it was to line everything up so that it was sequel,
Yeah.
or game. I wanted to be consistent and not be like, here's the base game with a weird DLC sequel, and then here's a sequel. Like, it felt more confusing to do that. So basically what I did was, anyone that had bought the old DLC automatically got a copy of the new full game release of the North Pole.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a few other people that bought it, because that does happen, but it really, yeah, it's not really like a moneymaker.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, so that makes sense. You know, you're trying to release a third game. You want it to be nice and even across the.
I did try doing a press release as if it was kind of a new game. It was, December, winter, the North Pole, they all kind of fit together. So I felt like that was a good timing beat to do all of that. But it really didn't get picked up by much. And while I did put some effort into it, it wasn't as much. It wasn't like a full release marketing thing, right? Like, it was just kind of try hitting all the basic beats and see if something will happen from there, which it didn't.
Gotcha. Yeah, when you were talking about confusion earlier, I thought this is what you were about to talk about, because I remember being confused at the time about what you were doing, and it makes sense to me now. Like, but did people? Did you get a lot of shit for that? Like, did people in your audience think you were trying to cash grab, or like they just didn't understand it, or was it a clean process?
I wouldn't say it was a completely clean process. I don't think anyone thought I was trying to cash grab. There might have been a couple people that came to me saying, but I bought the DLC, and I'm like, don't worry, you're going to get a key. And if you don't, come back to me and I will make sure that happens. Like, because that was absolutely not my intent. And I do know that there were people that did wind up buying Accelerate to the North Pole as its full game that had bought the DLC, but they did so, at least to the best of my knowledge, knowing what they were getting into, because I was as much as I possibly could saying, this is not a new game, it is the DLC, it's just moving over here, and for the first couple days you won't be able to access it until some things on the Steam backend needed button pressing. And I couldn't do that all to myself. Like, I had to get some Steam support to help me, which takes a couple days. That's not an instant thing. I'm like, if you guys want to buy it to support me, that's great, and thank you, but I don't expect you to. In fact, if you have anything, like, money is important to you in any way, don't do that. You're just going to get the game once it transfers over. So I do think that the messaging there was clear enough, but I definitely had some confusion in, don't you have a DLC that's this exact same thing? And I don't know if that was just me not messaging it correctly, or how I could do that better. I guess the thing to do better in the future is don't release a game as DLC.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds. I would be turned off of doing so. When you consider the things like any streamer is just gonna be confused by you trying to get them to play your game and then also bundling DLC with it. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to have the Accelerate games be separate games. Although I have seen on one of your recent Reddit threads, I did see people giving you a lot of crap over that, but we can get into that. I was reading through your your post-mortem of Accelerate to the Tropics. I was actually kind of surprised just how harsh people are. Maybe that's just Reddit, but how harsh people just were
in my
general.
experience, that is Reddit. You can roll a dice, and it's just some days you're going to be on the wrong end of the stick for whatever reason. Like, I actually think it's the tone of the first couple messages will set the tone for the rest of the thread.
Maybe, yeah.
Because I definitely went into that thread like, with a let's learn what else I can. If you guys have thoughts and opinions, like, thanks for whatever you're saying. Tried to approach this the best I could there, but people weren't really saying things that I didn't already either know or state in my post-mortem post above in a different way.
Yeah.
And I do see where I kind of triggered Reddit, where I said it wasn't marketing, which those words specifically was perhaps the triggering moment on it. Because yes, Reddit is correct. In some way it was marketing, but it wasn't the I skipped marketing. Like, it wasn't the I didn't do the effort. It wasn't the my effort didn't wind up where I thought it was because of this. It just wound up the game was too difficult. And there were problems with the game. Yeah, I learned this.
Yeah.
That's the post-mortem process.
Well, if anyone wants to read through that one, you can just Google like Accelerate to the Tropics post-mortem. The summary would be that I don't know, people in the comments were just a little bit overly harsh across the board. Maybe like a part of a communication barrier, perhaps assumed that you were less willing to like have humility over shortcomings than you actually are, which I think you're pretty reasonable when it comes to like analyzing what you did well and what you didn't. But yeah, okay, so we're finally caught up to Accelerate to the Tropics, your latest release, just Easter of this year, about a month ago. So regarding the finances, you were saying the first Accelerates, you said you didn't make any money, which, to be clear, what that means is, you value your time hours, and you broke even taking into consideration your hours tracked, which is probably a lot more than most 90% of indie game devs ever achieve, right? Is that what you meant by that?
Yeah, when I say I didn't make money on Accelerate, the original, I mean that I didn't cover my time costs, as you said. Like, I
didn't
actually
cover your
did
time
cover.
costs.
I did cover all of my expenses, so the money that I spent was actually recouped, but I didn't recoup the all of the hours. I have a very
your
measly
hours of work. Right.
$16 an hour is my time cost.
$16 an
and
hour.
That's not what I would charge anyone to work for them. That's not necessarily what I make off my adventure. That's not what I pay myself. That's just what every hour basically costs me to work.
And you're being extremely conservative and only giving yourself $16 because goddamn.
This is the absolute
15 years of experience minimum. Like, yeah. So okay, so how close, sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you were saying that you barely covered. So how close were you to covering your own time hours at $16 an hour? Just ballpark, if you know.
So the original Accelerate cost about $12,000, a little bit more than that, because I have some costs that I can't share for for respect of others and all. And I made 5,000.
Gotcha.
And that 12,000 was both my time and that, right? Like, my time was over $10,000 of that originally.
Right. Yeah. So, and the fact that you even track your own time and try to assign it a value, you're taking this a lot more seriously than most people, and you're probably achieving a lot more success than your average indie game dev. You know this about yourself, right? Or no?
I do know that I'm taking it seriously, yes. I don't know if I'm doing it better than an average game dev or not, though.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if your average game dev even ends up shipping the indie game they're working on. I don't know, but yeah, I don't have the stats on this. But when I think about like all the people that I watch on Twitch that do game dev, I think, wow, Tim is really towards the top there as far as his success as a business person. So It is impressive. And then you were saying for the DLC, which came its own game, you didn't experience much success off that at all, but you weren't feeling too bad about it because you knew you had to cut corners when it came to marketing and all that. But yeah, so that takes us to Eggcelerate to the tropics. How did the launch for this one go?
Not that great. I don't have the actual income numbers because I haven't broke it down per project just yet. And this particular month, once I get the Steam payout, I'll actually probably know a little bit better. But I got basically 100 sales to date. It's probably a little bit over that by now, but basically 100 sales to date in like the first month and a half of release. I don't know what it's been, but those that don't know, basically your first week is where most of your sales come from, especially with a holiday game like this, or at least what I think of as a holiday game. It's not that I can't keep marketing it and putting it on sale, and people will probably pick it up when it's on sale, but most of the sales have probably been done. And so 100 sales, almost all of those were at, I'd say, $9. It was not at the full price of the game because the game launched on 25% discount. And yeah, Steam's going to take their cut. Taxes will take their cut. And I'll wind up with about probably $450, $600, somewhere in that ballpark. So, like you were saying, I understood why the North Pole failed. I made some pretty critical mistakes. This particular game, I made sure I didn't make those mistakes, and marketing went really well. Influencer marketing actually went well. I got definitely well over 50, 70,000 live views from different streams. We had Soda Pop and play it, and Lyric played it.
I remember watching Soda Pop and play it live.
Yeah.
Wait, he played.
Both of those were over 20,000.
Well, I saw him play the original game. He played the Tropics one too. You're saying, or? Oh,
yeah,
I didn't even know.
Tropics too.
Wow.
Yeah, both of them played the Tropics.
Yeah.
And so many other streamers played it, and lots of streams with over 100 viewers, many over even 500. Like it was viewed quite a bit. I'd say the influencer campaign was actually successful in getting people to play and see the game. Where it flopped on its face, and I mean like just face plant into concrete, is the game was too hard. It's not forgiving. People got way too frustrated way too early, and most people didn't get beyond track 6. Like
I made it past track 6 for the record, but yeah.
Congratulations. So when people are playing it for just a couple minutes and then giving up on it, none of their viewers are going to go grab it. Like that's just what's going to happen there. If they had played it for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours or something, and actually like got through it, then I'd almost certainly have a different story that I'm talking here. But it was just too hard. Like, I've always known the Eggcelerate series to be hard, but this one I somehow made a little harder than I meant to.
I thought it was pretty interesting that this game turned out being more difficult than the first two because, well, I guess to provide the context, the first two games, you drive a car with a bowl strapped on the top. The egg cannot fall out of the bowl before you reach the end of the level. But in the third game, you drive a motorcycle with a bowl strapped to the top, and the egg cannot fall out of the bowl. So you actually have, and then the difference between the motorcycle and the car being that when the motorcycle turns, the motorcycle actually tilts. Therefore, the bowl tilts with it. So let's say that you're driving really fast and you make a hard right. Like the momentum of the egg is going to be to go to the left. And when you're playing as a car, it just flies out. because your bowl is flat, like, you know, it's parallel to the car. But when you're driving a motorcycle, you're tilting, and the bowl is also tilting. So it's actually mechanically, it's actually easier when you
Oh yeah,
don't think
mechanically
about
it's easier. It will do
the
exactly
level
what you're
design.
saying. It will hold it right in.
But it's like, I guess, did you make the level design really hard because you overcompensated for that? Is that the idea?
Effectively, that's what happened. That and one other thing. Um, I because you're on two wheels, and because one of the biggest complaints I've had in the entire series is all you gotta do is go slow. I decided that if you're going really, really slow, and to me, I almost never hit this mark of going this slow, but in hindsight, it was a bad idea to put this in. I should have just made it always stable, always stay up, and just deal with the comments. Because if you do hit this, the engine will make a different noise. It'll start getting to an idle speed. And once you hear that noise switch, the motorcycle is going to flop over, especially if you're trying to turn. It's no longer stable. It just tips itself over. And I think that just made the game way too hard because lots of people were going too slowly around the corners and just allowing themselves to tip over and not quite picking up on the feedback that the engine. Like I worked on the engine noise to make sure there was some cues that you are now going slow. And it's even slower than that cue flips over. Like you actually have a safe zone that you can kind of be in that idle sound and not tip over for another like 80% down to slow. But yeah, that just wound up too hard and too frustrating and not a fun mechanic. If I could do it again, I'd remove that one.
So you had people complain about that actually?
I didn't have many people verbally complain or write a review and complain or say that they didn't like this like exactly, but in my watching of them, because I watched many streams play, I try to do it in a way that I can learn from them without them knowing I'm there. And in watching it, I feel like that is an unsaid thing that should have been removed.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess that just surprised me because I didn't. I noticed that in the new Eggcelerate game that if you slow down enough, you just fall over. But it just wasn't much of a problem for me because you have to be going so slow. But maybe that's one of those things where, you know, I've already played your games for like 10
Yeah,
hours. I'm just used to it. Yeah.
that's exactly what it is. There was a couple of my testers that hadn't played the originals, but I think they were just quicker learners, and they got over that slowness really quick.
Well, I mean, all
And
your
most of the
fans
other
are racing
testers
game
had.
fans, right? So for the most part.
Yeah, most of them are.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, that makes sense. And then, but also, I guess the level design in general is just pretty tough right off the bat, too, right? Like, you know, that mechanics aside,
Yeah,
compared to the first
I
two
do
games.
introduce static obstacles a little sooner than I would have in previous games because I felt like it was too boring otherwise. I did try to keep level one is a little longer than previous level ones, but it has the same starting, the exact same couple corners is how every one of them starts in level 1 and 2. And by level 2, I'm adding the coconuts, but they're pretty much out of the way. Like they shouldn't be an actual obstacle, but somehow people made them more of an obstacle than they should have been. At least in my feelings, right? Like they're not very big
Yeah, and your
objects for how big the
feelings.
track is. Yeah, my feeling was really wrong on this one. Also the wind. If
Oh, the wind.
I would absolutely move the wind to like way later in the game. The wind is god awful. Um, and I don't know how to explain it. Either people understand what the wind is doing and they have no problem with it, or they have significant problems with it. There is no, I kind of get what I need to do. It's nobody seems to turn into the wind. Like this is what I learned watching people play
Yeah.
on level 5, I think it is. is where I'm introducing wind, and I gave you a safety zone. So the very first wind you see will actually push you onto a second track that it's not the ideal line of the track, but you don't lose the egg. You just kind of, oop, I went this way. What happened? And it was supposed to be a safe way to introduce wind, was my thought. What it wound up doing is teaching people that, oh, I don't need to turn into the wind. So that's how people tended to go through it, is just not turning into the wind. Whereas if you understood it, all you had to do is turn just slightly into the wind and nothing happens. So once you know where the wind is,
Yeah.
you just kind of give it a slight turn and you're good.
I kind of felt I don't know, I kind of felt a similar thing when I was playing with my inherent thing was like, oh man, I just need to avoid the wind. The wind is forceful. It's blowing at me. I need to just get away from it as fast as possible. And I would mess up the same, like yeah, whatever level 5 or 6. I would mess up the same like one of the first turns with the wind over and over. Even though it's like I know that I'm, yeah, maybe there's some inherent thing with the presentation where people are just like, oh, I just need to get away with this, get away from this immediately. I don't know. I definitely was. I felt dumb for the way that I was playing against it.
Yeah, it was common. It's even 25% the power the wind was in the original game. Like
Mm,
I halved it and then I halved it again. And I mean, you can't just drive straight through it, but it's pushing you so little now in compared to what it used to do. But yeah, like you
yeah.
said, you you just want to get through it as fast as you can, and it's challenging, too challenging, especially that early in the game.
Did you? So are most of your private testers? They're like hardcore fans of yours that like watch your stream a lot. Would that be accurate?
That would be accurate on this one, yes. I intended to release as Steam Next Fest and get more feedback from players. That was
Yeah.
actually one of my purposes for going. That's one of my purposes for having started in January, was so that I could make a vertical slice for Next Fest. The problem there was it was a demo, and I didn't have all the obstacles and um, yeah, there was a lot of the game that wasn't built. I basically had the demo built at the time of Steam Next Fest, and there were a couple people that did say that what I had in Next Fest was hard, but there were a lot of people that were seeming like it's also okay. And so, where Accelerate the franchise has always been a difficult franchise, I felt like that I'm pretty much on target, and as I add the obstacles, it will be about right.
Yeah.
Um, I then reached out to my stream and Discord to get some testers, a couple of which had never played any of the Accelerates, and probably more than should have been had played some of the originals. So obviously, some of the advice I got in there was a little more skewed than I thought it was. There were a couple people that I knew their skill point in the originals were a little lower. So as long as they were kind of getting through about the same, I felt like that was a pretty confident way to go forward. But perhaps they had already learned enough of the egg holding skills that that was actually a bad mark on my side. Like I thought it was a better way to look at it than it was.
Yeah. So yeah, changing gears a bit, but still related to your most recent Accelerate release. I guess all of them. It's probably your whole career in some sense, but I know you put a lot of time into marketing. I know on your stream even you do every Monday you have a stream that's pretty much dedicated to that, and you talked about having to make some sacrifices and having weaker marketing on the second Accelerate game. I guess what is your how do you determine your process? How do you determine what are the marks you need to hit? How did you learn this? And yeah, what do you do? And how did you come to that conclusion that that's what you should do? Pretty much when it comes to game marketing.
Oh, how I came up with the ideas, I've read a lot of postmortems, both on Reddit and basically anywhere I can get my information. I read lots of articles on, just Googling how to market a game, and watched a bunch of YouTube videos, and like absorbed myself in a lot of the information. And I don't take information from just like a single source when I'm doing this. I'm trying to find the patterns, the things that seem to make the most sense to me, and and things that have a reason. Like somebody saying, I made millions of sales because of just this weird thing, but you get a feeling that something else is off about it. I'll listen to that feeling and probably just go with there's probably something more to their story, and they got lucky in a way that they don't quite understand, because that is a very big part of how games sell. Like look at Accelerate, the original. That one went more than I thought it would. Like I was expecting it to be kind of internal to my community, but it actually did go a little bit further. And most of that was from influencer marketing with the Keymailer and other types of campaigns getting streamers to play. Yeah, so basically I just read as much material as I could, found the patterns, found the things that resonated well with me, and I kind of tackled those. Like you'll see the beats of tell the press that your game is coming out, and contact streamers and such. I think contacting streamers is great for certain types of games. Like Accelerate was perfect, but I don't think it would make so much sense if your game is a story-based thing that only lasts a couple hours. Like if a streamer plays that, the viewer of the stream also got the story. Like, yeah, you might get the word of your game out, but it's not like that person has a reason to go play your game now. Whereas with Accelerate, and this wasn't something I planned, this is just kind of something I noticed happen. Accelerate caused a lot of oh my god moments. Like, oh my god, I'm gonna lose. How did I save that? And then you drop it immediately after, because that's just the nature of the game. Um, and it created really good reactions, and I think that led to good influencer marketing material. But yeah, it's just giving yourself the time and trying to do these things. So every Monday I'll do the KPI updates, which is your key performance indicators, and trying to just take a beat on where things are going. What are you expecting? Are they like every now and then my Twitch followers will go up more than normal, right? Like or Twitter followers will go up more than normal, or YouTube subscribers or something. Like these little things will just kind of sometimes spike up, and if you don't kind of keep an eye on what they're doing, you can miss what you're doing to make that happen. And as you kind of get, I don't know, a feel for it, you can know what's going to do well and what won't. And I say the word no, but it's more of a you have a better chance of doing well. It's not a guarantee.
I I agree very strongly that Accelerate is a good stream game. I mean, like rage games. Everybody there's a reason that things like Jump King become a Twitch meta. It's just rage is fun. I don't know. It hurts, but it hurts so good. I mean, I was playing I literally lost my voice a little bit. I was playing Accelerate to the Tropics the other day on stream, and I was so angry, but not like really angry, like in the angry in the way that you play Jump King and get angry. But like I genuinely could not hold myself from losing my voice, even though I was having fun. I could not stop cursing your game. So it's yeah, it doesn't surprise me that reaching out to streamers is one of the things that helped you more. It's going to be interesting though to see, let's say that the next game that you work on is a game that doesn't lend itself so much to stream content. I guess that would mean that you would probably want to prioritize other things a bit more than that. I mean, I'm guessing your strategy must change a bit on a game to game basis, or maybe not so much.
It hasn't yet. And maybe I take into account that I'm more accustomed with influencer marketing. So maybe as I'm designing a game, I try to kind of play into that a little
Yeah.
bit. It's also possible that maybe I try doing something else too, because it is probably good to spread the baskets every now and then. Although one of the pieces of advice that I've heard, and it resonates very well with me. I get tons of advice to be like, go make TikTok content, go make YouTube shorts, go make Twitter content, go make Facebook content or Instagram content or this new social media platform no one's heard of yet content. Like, here's the thing. You can't do it all. Every one of those platforms has a slightly different feel to the content, and if you are off from that feel, you will not go anywhere. That is like, you can't just put a TikTok short on YouTube or a TikTok thing on YouTube Shorts. It's not a one-to-one. They are slightly different. I don't know the nuances. I'm not an expert there at all. I'm not even an expert in marketing, really. I just do what I can.
Only on Mondays is he an expert in marketing.
Not even on Mondays. I just do my best. And I'm showing the process along the way, which is a lot of struggle. But what I would say is, don't do them all. Do the ones that resonate well with you and you understand. So I was part of Twitter for many, many years. Like, I've been on Twitter for a very long time. And yes, it is more, I've always looked at it as more game devy. Like, I am connecting with our game devs connect with me. I always have looked at it as it's not a player thing. But I did create one for my company, and that one I try talking to players the best I can. I do mention Twitter, and I think Twitter's kind of dying at this particular moment in time, but hoping that maybe it can revive itself. Yeah, just, you can't spread yourself too thin. Focus on the ones you know. Right now, I'm doing fairly good in Reddit. I'm doing fairly decent on YouTube. Both of those are also game dev oriented, which is not marketing the game per se. It's marketing more my stream, if anything, that I'm trying to push. It's marketing maybe my brand as a developer trying to help other developers. It's just a different audience, and I have a lot of learning to do in how to actually reach the players of racing games, because that is not as easy as just saying, "Hey, I made a racing game."
Yeah. I really like your point that you make about, all these different social media platforms there's a bit of nuance in all of them as far as like what the general vibe is, and if you don't match it above a certain baseline, you're not gonna get very far, because I've seen the same argument that you've seen where everybody just feels like, oh, just put your stuff on everything, but it's like, well, no, you really have to do it right, or it may not be worth your time. And I feel like it took me a while to realize, like, hey, I'm wasting my time making posts on Instagram when I'm half-assing it and don't use the platform myself and don't really get it well, when I could just be putting more effort into, maybe just put that time into YouTube, Twitter, or whatever. I am curious, though, for you personally, as far as like social media posts go, for your games, whether it be, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, etc. What are the ones that you've personally experienced the most success with and put the most effort into?
Possibly Reddit.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna say that as a game developer talking to game developers, not a game developer talking necessarily to other players, because it seems like every time I post on certain things, my thing just goes away as self-promotion, which I don't know, that's hit and miss. But I think Reddit has my biggest like, when I make a post there, I can regularly know, like, I have a pretty good feeling beforehand, this one is going to go well. And unless something else went well just before me, it will usually go well when I have that feeling. Like, I know how to read that community and give them something valuable for that community while usually talking about my game, not usually linking it. I'm not saying that it's usually good in getting me sales or anything like that, but it is the one that I would say I is strongest to just post something and get actual likes and whatever from.
Yeah, get engagement from. So what kind of content? So I haven't really seen your Reddit post a lot. Someone in my chat the other day linked to your postmortem on the newest Eggcelerate game. But yeah, so what do you? Is it just you do a postmortem for every game, or you post other stuff too? What's your main content there?
I try to post a question every week, which is part of my marketing Monday, as I'll post a question on Reddit. And
Okay.
I'm trying to extend those questions into also more player-based communities to see if I can't get an angle in there, get my foot in. What do players want? Get communicating with actual players instead of just developers is kind of what I'm trying to do. It's not that one's kind of going almost nowhere. But I guess just keep trying. The other things that I do on Reddit that seem to do good are, yeah, your postmortems, your first month sales, whenever I learn something big. So every month I do my business review and I go through all the things that I learned in the previous month and how everything went. It's basically a postmortem of every month is what I wind up doing in my adventure.
Just on like a game dev subreddit or
Yeah,
your own
I'll usually
subreddit?
post. I'll post these. I'll post the bigger lessons on our game dev. Is where I
Oh
usually.
yeah, for like the monthly thing though, you posted on our game dev.
I don't post the monthly one monthly. It's more of a when I do this.
Oh okay.
When I do this process, so I post that on Patreon every month. That's where that gets posted.
Mm-hmm.
But the takeaways, like part of it is a learning process. Like I go through, these are the 3 big lessons that I've learned this month and why. And if one of those lessons is like something that could really appeal to other game developers and really help somebody else out, I'll do a little write up about it, being like, this is what happened last month and what I learned from it, and how you can probably avoid this mistake yourself and save yourself some time. And those, some of them do well and some of them don't. I haven't really found a good pattern there. They usually do better than um, some of my random questions. The random questions can, I would say, 2/3 of those go nowhere, and some of those that go somewhere that I don't want them to go, because Reddit sometimes does that. And then the other ones go big for unknown reasons. Like some of those, like I'll ask just a random game dev question, like how much time do you spend making games in a week? And sometimes that will do absolutely nothing, and then sometimes you get all kinds of people commenting on it, and it's good engagement.
One thing that's really interesting to me about how you do your indie game dev is that you're very willing to share all of your knowledge and all the things that you learned, and you even share like your entire breakdown of your time tracking and your revenue breakdown, which is something I do as well. Well, I don't track my time in depth like you do because I'm just a lazy fuck, but I do put all my revenue numbers publicly broken down based off of where I made the money from, where my expenses are. And I just do it because I think it's kind of cool. I just think it's a nice thing to share with my friends. But I know that you're very business minded and oriented, and put more effort into your game dev business than anything. I'm curious what led you to, what made you decide that that's a good idea to share so publicly.
Huh. I Hmm. I don't know what actually led me there, but I know what I feel after doing it. And maybe I had this prior to having done it. I do remember having a pretty big do I share my financials or not? Like I started sharing my time immediately because that's what the tracker was doing in June 2018. And it actually did do the finances too, but really all I was doing is tracking my spending. because I wasn't making money. so, so it was kind of like, this is how much time and money is going into my adventure, but nothing's really coming back. And I think that's just where it started. And as it kind of grew, it was like I'm comfortable sharing what goes into it. And I want to give people the honest truth about indie game development. Like, I know that you can possibly actually make a hit game. It does happen, but it's also really, really rare. And I want people that want to travel my same dream. I want to give them as much information as I can to weigh their risks themselves. Like, I always try to remind people too that I've been making games for a long time. I went to school for game design and development. I worked in the industry for 5 years. I saved up a huge runway to make all this happen. It's not like I jumped out of high school and just starting to make my first indie game with nothing. Right? Like, this isn't my first game. And then when you start looking at the stats, even like when you know that too, it's kind of like a wake up call that you're not just going to jump in and make money. And I don't want people to think that that's what's going to happen. I don't want somebody to be like, yo, I'm going to quit my job. I have a year saved up and we're going to make games. And I've never made a game before, but we're going to go make a game. Like, the chances of that being successful, it's not zero, but it's probably the same as spending that money on lottery tickets.
It's yeah, it's oversaturated. You can only get the most dedicated people barely scraping by. It is true. It's yeah,
I think that's the lesson that Tropics has taught me, right? Like,
yeah.
With Accelerate the Tropics, I expected my marketing push to go beyond my community. And at least as far as views went, it did. But it also didn't lead to sales.
But you do feel pretty confident that the main reason it didn't do better is because of the difficulty, right?
I am pretty confident that is the reason why the influencer marketing didn't go further. Yes.
So if you feel like you understand what you did wrong and you know how to iterate on that, why do you feel so down about it overall? If you feel like you know what your mistake was and you know how to improve it.
I mean, I guess I'm kind of learning that in this particular moment, despite having given you those exact words. Like, yeah, I guess I don't know a way to how to answer that.
Yeah, I just felt like if I released a game and I was like, wow, this game's perfect, and then all the reviews came in and I was like, oh, I disagree with all the feedback, I'd be like, oh man, having an existential crisis here. But if I released a game and everybody give the same feedback and I agreed with them, then I'd be like, well, that's unfortunate, but you know, I'm not going to make that same mistake again. Which I'm guessing you probably feel the same. You probably will be a lot more careful about the difficulty of the level design in your games going forward, right?
Absolutely. That's part of the reason why I'm not doing any game that is built on the premise of being difficult, at least for the next couple games. Like, I'm not going to say I'll never return to a premise of being difficult, but it's not going to be the direction I travel for the next couple games. And you are definitely correct. I have taken away a lot of lessons from the Tropics. In fact, probably the most lessons that I have from any of my previous games. I don't think the North Pole or original got a proper post-mortem, which is something I learned when I was doing the post-mortem for the Tropics. Not super proud of that, but life threw weird curveballs, and that's just what wound up going with it. Yeah.
I also I hope you cut yourself some slack for the fact that making a rage game that is difficult and, under the umbrella of a rage game, but is also fun for a casual player, is such a difficult thing to do, and probably not a thing that I would recommend to, if maximizing your likelihood of making a successful game. Like, it's only so many games strike the perfect balance. I am curious. So, are there any other lesser factors that you feel are still somewhat significant? So, like, we're saying the level design, the balancing of the difficulty is an issue, but is there maybe more so beyond that? I mean, some of the feedback that I see, like in your post-mortem Reddit post, for example, is like people are just hating on you for making a third game. In general, just the fact that you made a third game that doesn't significantly switch up the gameplay. Do you think that maybe that's just are you just turned off of doing that at all, maybe based off of your feedback, or no?
My opinion is the gameplay did change fairly significantly between all three of those games. Yes, your core concept of carrying an egg and the core gimmick was the same, and I'll take that from the meaning of what they're saying. And the core concept of it being difficult, like that is the franchise. Like if you go to a McDonald's, you're expecting hamburgers. That's the franchise. If you went to a McDonald's and all they had was pizza, you are going to be disappointed. And I've had a hard time with some people in that Reddit thread and even on stream a little bit of this is the franchise of Eggcelerate, and I'm sticking to that truth. For better and worse. There is absolutely some things I wish I would have gone back to the original to change, but you can't change the original. We are in this, and I'm not going to change the franchise. I do think there's a couple things. I don't know if they're mentioned in that Reddit thread or not, but the tropics is probably not Easter enough. I think is something else I kind of picked up on. I think the original hit something special because it had a springtime farm-esque, the chalk on the street, like it really sang to Easter. And I think I kind of misread that both the North Pole and tropics are straying far enough away from Easter that it doesn't have those vibes. And I think that leads into some of it.
Yeah, that could be a part. It's hard to measure, right? All three of the games have been coinciding with holidays. It's hard to know how much it's actually benefiting you, it being linked to a holiday, right?
I believe it really helped the first one. I think that was a great timing beat. I think it could have helped on the others, but I just don't think their theme tied into Easter as much as I probably meant to. I think the North Pole at least still had some chalk marks, and my idea of it was that the snow was melting, but it probably felt a little too Winter Wonderland rather than snow is melting. I probably should have just done some snow on the edges of roads, but that wouldn't have been the same.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really, man, it really is hard to put value on, though, like how much it's actually providing you. The fact that, like, you say, like, oh, I think it benefited me a lot, the fact that it was coinciding with Easter, but I mean, it's really speculation, right? Like, how can we possibly know?
I mean, I did have a bunch of streamers in the original saying this is the perfect Easter game. I mean, I was pitching it to them as that. Yeah. Right, like that was my pitch, is here's the perfect game for Easter.
I see. Okay, yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
And even with the tropics, I had a lot of people that played through, and a lot of people actually did beat it despite it being difficulty, and I mean brutally difficult. It gets that my game inspired them to do an egg pearl. So during April, they were playing all egg games, and I don't know if that's because I was also still trying to shove it as this is an Easter game. Like that was my messaging. I was riding on that. So I am obviously putting some idea in their head, right? But I do think that people took that idea and ran further with it than what I gave them. So I think it did tie in at least a little bit. Just as a quick note, I don't know if it really matters, and we weren't necessarily talking about the influencer marketing, but what I did notice is streamers of like 30 viewers and less tended to play much deeper into the game than streamers with more than 100 viewers.
I saw some.
Like,
You mentioned this statistic actually. I think in your post-mortem, and you attributed that to the larger. Well, I guess yeah. What do you think is the reason for that? Let me. I don't know why I'm trying to recap it when you could just say it.
my best guess was that the larger streamers have more things that they're being offered, so they're more likely to just jump onto the next thing, and there's more of a pressure to do well, is what people have said. I both agree and disagree with the pressure to do well, but I do also get that you have 500 people watching you and you're failing a little bit more. It's, if you're not actually into the game, then you're not going to continue very long. Whereas when you are a smaller streamer, it might be like, I don't get games that often, so since this person did give me a game, let me keep pushing through, even though it is a little difficult. But I do know in that Reddit thread, somebody was like, yeah, you wouldn't want to be playing this game either if viewers were saying don't play crappy games or whatever.
I'm looking at that comment right now. I've got it pulled up.
And I don't know if it was Lyrics or Soda Poppin' stream. I forget which one it was, but I was watching that one live when it happened. And whoever it was, one of them went in before they even loaded the game. They went in being like, we played the original of this. And they did good with the original. They liked the original. But they went in with this wall right in front of them that did not allow them to get into the game. Like maybe not purposely, but they maybe subconsciously just did not let themselves even flow into the game at all. And their chat was actually really into it. Like, their chat was basically asking for them to continue playing. Their chat moves so much faster than what ours do, right? Like, you're getting a sentiment there. You're not getting messages.
Yeah, I don't get any chatters. Yeah.
Yeah. But they still quit really early because they personally didn't get themselves into it. And so I think there's a little bit of that, right? Like, I do get it if your viewers are not into it and you're going to move on to something because you're not into it too. That makes sense. It's going to happen. It's not going to be for everybody. But but it wasn't the viewers that were edging them on in most cases that I saw.
Yeah, I do think that there is a baseline level of, first of all, like, if I have 30 viewers versus 3,000 viewers, if I have 30 viewers and a game dev reaches out to me and wants to connect with me and wants me to play their game, I'm going to be like, wow, I only get so many connections with other cool people. I'm going to want to play their game because I love the idea of this connection, whereas a 3,000 viewer streamer is going to be like, well, I have a million opportunities. I'm going to only do what is best for my stream and my audience. And I think that points towards, the value of the feedback that you might get from larger streamers versus smaller streamers. Like, if I play your game for 2 hours, you can't trust that means good things, because maybe I'm just doing it because I'm cool with you. I mean, me personally, I like your Eggcelerate game, and I think it's a fun game to play on stream, which is why I've played it like 15 hours instead of like 2 hours. But just in general, there is that aspect, like, where if it's like Soda Poppin' plays your game for 3 hours, it's like, oh man, this is really some good stuff going on. But also, I feel like you have to take it with a grain of salt, because it's like, just because your game doesn't make good content for your stream doesn't mean that it's not a good game. Maybe it's an amazing game but not a great stream game, or maybe it's an amazing game for other people's streams but not this person. I mean, I know personally there's a lot of games that I love. Some of my favorite games in the world are games that I probably wouldn't bother playing on stream, because I just don't think I could be that entertaining while playing it. So I have
Yeah,
your
I actually think that's what happened
yeah.
with Soda Poppin', because I like as soon as Soda Poppin' was done with my game, he went on to another one. And I don't know what he was playing, but it started up with just a little bit of story dialogue, like that was your instant thing. And based on his reaction to that, I think had Accelerate had a story, which it doesn't, but had it had some form of story, I think he would have been a lot more into it. Just I think that's one of the things that works for him. And I'm not saying that you should make a game that works for Soda Poppin'. Make sure you're making a game for your audience, whether it works for him or not. That's just what it is. And yeah, that goes to the make your game for your audience and not for somebody specific. Just because
Yeah.
they didn't like it doesn't mean they wouldn't like it off stream, or doesn't mean that it's a bad game. It's just not for them.
Yeah, and you have to coordinate that with your marketing, right? In the sense that like, oh man, if I'm gonna spend a lot of time marketing to streamers, I want my game to be good stream content, sort of thing.
I mean, that is part of the influencer marketing, is trying to find the influencers that have an audience that match your game and that would like your game. That is a very big part of it. It's not all about just raw numbers.
Right, right. So I have your postmortem pulled up here, and one of the comments that you made was that you, and maybe you don't feel this way anymore, but one of the comments that you made that I noticed a couple people got a little snippy with in their replies is that you were saying that perhaps the difficulty of the game makes larger streamers feel self-conscious for failing in front of a live audience. One response, for example, here. Some guy with like 10 upvotes says, "My 2 cents, larger streamers aren't afraid to fail on screen. What they're afraid of is losing their viewers' attention. I cannot tell you how many times big streamers will play games that don't match the pace of their streams, and their viewership starts to decline immediately because of this." And he goes on a little bit more, but I actually would agree with that pretty heavily. I don't think it's about the difficulty game. I think it's about the, and it sounds like maybe
I don't think it's
you agree with this more than
Yeah,
me.
I don't think it's about the difficulty either. I left part of that post in there because that's some feedback I was getting on my stream, and I do think that there is a edge of it. I think there is a hint towards it, but I don't think it's the full picture. I think there is something to consider with it, but not like this is the answer. This
Yeah.
is the reason why.
Yeah,
It was
well,
just they weren't into the game.
I would agree with you that the game would be more successful if it was less difficult, but I guess I don't think that the difficulty disproportionately affects bigger streamers. I think that the difficulty affects Soda Poppin' to the same degree that it affects me, where it's like, yeah, there's this threshold where people are going to rage quit because of the difficulty, but it's not really because of their average viewer count, in my opinion.
Right.
Maybe it is a little bit, but okay, yeah, I think we're on the same page. I think that because that was one of the things you mentioned in your curated post, people just ran with it, I guess, a bit more than you really meant for it to be considered.
Yes.
Which I guess that's the nature of Reddit, right? You're probably used to that. Man. Oh, Reddit. Do you see a lot of social media conversion? I mean, you say that you cite this as your main source of engagement. Do you end up getting people from Reddit to follow your things like your Twitter or your YouTube or your Twitch? Do you have much like concrete reward for putting in all that effort?
Hard to say, really. I've not been posting my YouTube stuff on Reddit in ages. I don't know if that's actually good or bad. The reason I stopped doing that was because, from my understanding, it can influence the YouTube algorithm a bit by having a bunch of random views, like a bunch of random impressions from supposedly a bunch of different people that would typically watch something else. Just because you're on our game dev, right? Like Reddit game dev, doesn't necessarily mean that if you go to YouTube that you want to watch game dev videos. So if somebody is on our game dev and likes watching hiking videos and then goes to click on my video, it might be confusing the algorithm, thinking that my video now belongs to people that like hiking. That's my theory anyway, and that's why I kind of stopped posting my YouTube videos elsewhere. I've read enough things that, like I say, this is all about reading various information and feeling your own gut instinct on how relevant or not it might be. And the information that I've read feels like there could be some truth behind it. I'm not saying that it is true, but it just feels like there could be truth. And I've read it more than once. It's not like I just read that one once and was like, yeah, let me believe it. It was like it's popped up a couple times, and I'm like, there could be actual truth there. So I tried stopping. But every now and then I'll make a post on Reddit, and I'll do it kind of as a self-promoting post with, here is a link to my stream at the end for I don't know, for whatever special event it might be. I don't even remember the last time I did this. It's been a long time. And then people will usually come in and hang out, at least for that particular day. If that was a good post, I will see some people, and some of them might convert into regulars. I don't really have a history on that. That's a little bit harder.
Yeah.
I have to like, memorize the name. But I do definitely see like there's a 10% more viewers here today because people are coming in from Reddit. If I did a really good post and it was bringing them, like I have noticed something like that before.
Well, that's cool that you're able to see that. So Tim, taking a step back a bit, I'm curious about your fixation with the racing genre as a whole and how that came about.
I don't know how it came about. It's just I've always been very interested in the physics of racing. That's kind of where my, I guess, obsession and dream project of a racing simulator that gets deep into the nitty-gritty, hyper-realistic physics comes from. There's just something really magical and enticing to me about a vehicle with 4 tires touching the road, driving at the limit. Like there's a lot of things to balance there, and I don't know, it's a lot more complicated than it kind of looks on the surface. Like you can just look at it as, yep, the car's going fast, and that is definitely one way to do it, but it's kind of like dancing a giant weight on top of those 4 tire points, and you want to kind of move that weight around and kind of balance it to make it behave as quickly as you can around the track. It's deep, and that's kind of what drives me, I guess. The focus on racing only games is mostly so that I can work towards my dream of the racing simulator. I do like other games, or I do like making other games, right? Like I just think, as far as an indie goes, if you can specialize in one thing and really nail that one thing, it's probably going to work in your benefit rather than trying to learn a whole new genre again. Somebody was asking a while ago, would I put Eggcelerate or another game of mine on mobile? And the answer is not necessarily a no. But if I can't make something work on Steam, a platform that I'm actually actively studying and learning about and really trying to understand, how am I going to jump onto another platform like mobile that I have absolutely no clue about? It's just as saturated, and expect to do any better? Like, yeah, I guess you have more lottery rolls if you put your game on both platforms, but it's also more work for those lottery rolls. And yeah, I'm just kind of, I guess my dream project is on the computer. Like it's not going to be a mobile racing simulator because that just wouldn't make sense. So that's just kind of where I stick, is what will work for me in the future.
Yeah, and you've only done PC releases so far as your indie dev goes, right?
Yeah.
Are you planning to explore other options anytime soon?
I think I'd be more apt to explore other options with a game that's growing an audience. Kind of like multiplayer or level editors or other really big community engaging features. I get this one a lot, is why don't you make a multiplayer game? Because a multiplayer game triples or quadruples your cost. Like, it's not just put stuff in, especially when you're talking about a racing game. You can't do cool little tricks that you can do with a bunch of the games, like delay the input, right? Sometimes you can just delay the input a little bit and the players don't notice it because that's just the way the game works. You can't do that with a racing game. Your car's going too fast. You can't just say, yep, there's a 300 millisecond lag between your input and what happens. But if a game had a community growing around it, like I had 10, 15, 20,000 players actively playing the thing, then I'd put in a level editor or multiplayer or one of these bigger features. It's going to actually bring that community together and give them something to play together. Whereas if you just do it without that community there, you're kind of just hoping it's going to work and that the community will come, and it doesn't make the community come.
Yeah. It's no, it is a lot of effort. I'm on the same page as you there. Well, I guess yeah, so approaching a conclusion here, I guess what is taking where you're at now, what are your goals for the future? Do you think you'll make another Eggcelerate sequel, or do you have other projects in mind that you see as your next big thing? Yeah, what are you going to be doing in the next couple of years?
Well, I'll be making racing games. I'll be working my way towards my dream.
Brand consistency, yeah.
I don't think I'm going to be making another Eggcelerate sequel ever again. I think the Eggcelerate series has come to an end with Tropics, unless something really magically tells me that there's a reason to do it. Unless I have a real big belief, I don't see it happening. I think my next game is going to be something that's going to be more opt-in difficulty. So I'm hoping that when I make it, my dad could get through it. My dad's not a gamer, so
your friend's mom.
If he can, yeah, a friend's mom, exactly. Get somebody that's not a gamer, allow them to get through at least the basic portion of the game. Obviously, there should still be a difficulty curve there, but not ramp it up to Eggcelerate difficulties. And then have like these little side paths, if you will, like little quests that if you want to collect all of the stars in this level, you do additional missions or something that might actually ramp up the difficulty. Like now you have to beat the high score. That's actually where Turbo Boom went. Turbo Boom is one of my older games that isn't coming out next because of its time trial, and I want to focus on something more than just time trial right now. But it's sitting in my back pocket, and it's fairly easy to drive through. It's not going to be challenging to get to the end of the game and unlock all the levels, but to unlock all of the gold trophies or the perfect trophies, that's going to be a lot more time consuming because you actually have to have the skill for that. And I think that's what I was missing in the Eggcelerate series that I want to bring to the next games.
Interesting. Well, I'm looking forward to it, man. Stepping back just a little bit, I was curious. What did the game dev come first, or did the interest in racing come first? Like, did you follow professional racing before you were in the game dev and that sort of thing, or what was the order there?
I didn't follow professional racing for a very long time, but I was interested in racing prior to having done that. Kind of about the same time. I think game dev actually comes first by a little bit, and then racing very quickly behind it.
Gotcha. Okay, so yeah, so that's interesting. I guess I just kind of assumed that you must have been a huge like NASCAR fan or something before you got into game dev to lean that hard into it. I get what you're saying though, like when you say like the physics aspect of it being interesting. Like when you think about what are the most popular genres of games in modern times, I would think that racing would probably be one of the ones with a more unique set of situations for, physics behavior.
Yeah, that's where I think that's kind of where the original Accelerate was, because it had racing with an egg, like
Yeah.
not your typical racing game. Um, and despite changing the physics and the gameplay actually changing a fair bit between the other sequels, going back to that Reddit comment that kind of said it's the same game over and over, from the outside perspective, it is, because you're not feeling the physics. Like, those physics of drifting changes how you play the game, and the physics of riding the motorcycle change how you play the game. Um, but the core gimmicky idea of carrying that egg, that was already done. Um, yeah.
Well, yeah, before we wrap up here, are there any final thoughts or like pieces of advice or anything that you just really want to say while you have the floor?
Uh, Basically, I'd say if you're wanting to make indie games, as like that is your dream, is to make your own games and make money from it. Take it seriously. Try tracking your time and try understanding what's going into it and what you're getting back out of it. Even if you have a full-time job. In fact, keep your full-time job as long as you can. Build up a very good safety net before you do, because
Yeah.
it's risky. Understand the risks you're going to be involved in, but also don't be afraid to try.
Yeah. Are you feeling confident about your full-time indie thing? Or are you feeling confident that this is going to be your forever thing? Or are you kind of thinking, I might have to get back into full-time software dev stuff?
I think right now I'm pretty terrified. Um,
Yeah.
I've still got a solid 4 years of runway. So I'm. It's not like I'm in any position that's that I should be terrified in. But I've also released 2 products since going full time that both haven't gone anywhere. Like maybe $1,000.
Right, right. Um,
So I'm a little bit terrified of that, but perhaps there's reasons as we look back on it. Maybe we can learn from those reasons and do something better next time. Because I also very much know that my first, second, third, and fourth game are not going to bring me profits. It might not even happen in my fifth or sixth game, but eventually we will hit one that does something, and hopefully that will kind of um, recoup some of the other losses.
yeah, it's I mean, I feel like as well it's very clear that you have been learning from your mistakes. You've learned what's worked and what hasn't, at least to some degree. So, uh it's not like, release 2 games that you consider to be well, aren't making a profit, right? It's not like you're it's not a net zero in terms of knowledge gained, at least. So is there, so you have your website, tirebytes.com, tyrebytes.com, and you have your Twitch stream, twitch.tv/Tim Beaudet, Beaudet spelled Beaudet. Anything else that you really want? What else would you shout out? Where else should people follow you and see what you're doing, if anywhere?
Probably for some of my lessons that I've learned, or that I learn along the way, and I then create videos on YouTube about those lessons, and they're kind of more concise than what you would find on Twitch. But you can either stop by on Twitch and ask about things, or just jump onto YouTube/Tim Beaudet as well.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Tim. This has been really insightful. I've known you for a long time, but I haven't ever like sat down to get a long chat with you about your history before. So thanks, man.
Yeah, it was a good chat.
Well,
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, thank you all viewers and listeners. This episode was recorded live at twitch.tv/EvanMMO. As always, big shout out to the sponsor of everything that I do, Covalence, the school that I learned programming at initially before I was doing any sort of game dev or anything. Covalence.io/r/RetroMMO. And thank you so much, everyone. Goodbye.